back to my channel. I have a very fun video for you guys today, and going through websites and just like looking for decor and stuff for my room and things for our house and stuff. I always find overpriced things and I'm like, I can definitely make that. So we're going to be doing some DIY decor dupes. So I picked out a couple different ones and you guys also helped me decide between a couple different ones that we are going to be recreating today, and I'm super excited to share with you guys how they turned out. And if you are new, make sure that you subscribe down below for new videos every single Wednesday on home, lifestyle, and DIY videos. This is just what I love to do, so I love to share all of them with you. And if you have any specific DIY dupes that you would like me to tackle or figure out for you, make sure that you leave them in the comments below, and I would be happy to look through them and work on those in upcoming projects. And let me know how you guys thought that these projects turned out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. As I said, there are two different projects we're going to be working on today. The first one of them being a pillow DIY, and I wanted to find something that was super textured and boho and fun, something that I could easily recreate with some items and materials that I already had. I ended up finding this one on Etsy, and it's a little bit overpriced, of course, because it is handmade, but we were able to make it for cheaper. It is $39.99 on Etsy, and we're going to use the materials that I already have, and I'm going to walk you guys through that process. Alright, so it's time to start putting this pillow together. I have the picture right in front of me so I can kind of get a similar look. I don't want to go out and buy fabric. I think my neighbor is mowing his lawn, so sorry if you hear that, but I have a big bin of fabric here. Oh, there's a Cheez-It box in there that's for like t-shirt pressing it anyway. But I'm gonna try to find similar fabrics. I know that I have a bunch of pink and I think I have a good amount of neutrals as well, and that's basically what this is. And essentially, if you've watched any of my decorating videos or anything like that, you've seen that I've made a bunch of pillow covers. So I follow this specific pattern on Pinterest that I'll leave linked below. I'm gonna try to walk you guys through it as best as I can in this video, but if you want more specific instructions from the woman who actually created it, it'll be down below for you. So this pattern is pretty much how to make an envelope pillow. It works every time. It's super simple. There's nothing that you have to do with zippers or anything, but essentially there's a front and then there's two back pieces that overlap a few inches, and we're gonna work on that front piece where we're basically patching all the different fabrics together. Okay, and then the main thing to keep in mind here is how big your pillow is. One of the big things that I'm doing to save money on this is I'm just making a cover. I'm not including the actual pillow in this pricing, but I'm pretty sure I got it for like $5 or $10 off of Amazon. So my pillow is 16 by 26, so essentially I need to figure out the proportions for all the different fabrics. The pink seems to be quite a bit smaller than the other two sections. I'm going to start putting some combinations together and we'll see what we come up with. And I'll probably have to move to the floor so you guys can actually see what I'm doing because the sun glare isn't working in my favor. So as I said, I'm going to be going through all of my different fabrics and seeing what I have. I really don't want to go out and buy anything, so I found this perfect pink fabric that went really well with the one on Etsy, and I tried to figure out proportions. That's what I'm doing on my phone. There is some calculations. I believe I did the pink one 8 inches wide, and then the other two I did 10 inches, which is a total of 28 inches. And I thought this worked really well. If you have a rotary mat and rotary cutters, it works really nicely and gives you a pretty clean edge, especially since we didn't take the time to iron any of these. So this is what we have going so far. It looks a little bit weird. Sometimes I'll iron these out, but I will iron it out once I actually have everything together. I find that if I don't iron it out at this stage, it doesn't really make much of a difference. It'll look better than this. It's just all crinkled from being all folded. And this is snowflake fabric. I'm actually just going to be flipping it over just so I get more of like a floral design. I didn't really have anything that was like solid white. And honestly, I don't think I really wanted anything solid white, but it does give it a little bit of color. This was the closest I could find to like a beige color. I have a bunch of this stuff, but this is just gonna have to work. And then honestly, this is pretty spot on. I couldn't be more happy with this mat. So essentially the next step is taking our pins, which I have right here. If you don't sew or you'd like to get into sewing, this is something that is definitely very helpful, very inexpensive as well. So this is going to be the front. It doesn't really matter which side of these two fabrics is showing the same on each side, like it doesn't really matter, but I really want to make sure that this silvery snowflake pattern doesn't end up on the outside of my pillow, because that's not what we're going for. So essentially I'm going to flip this all over. We're going to attach the fabrics together just with probably about 1/2 inch of fabric. We're going to stick a pin in it and we're just going to connect everything together, sew along those seams, and then we'll probably be done for the night. And since my pillow is 16 by 26, I made this whole entire piece together 28-ish by, I think that's 18. So I added 2 inches to the length and the width just to make sure that we have plenty of fabric and plenty of wiggle room in case anything goes wrong. So we're gonna get going on that and sew everything together. We're gonna hope that my sewing machine works with me tonight and we're able to get this done super quickly. And if you've never pinned anything together, it's pretty simple, especially for this. I just went through and I just kind of folded a 1/2 inch strip along each piece of fabric, and then you just sort of weave under and back up with your pin, and it's pretty simple. Like I said, I did this on the back side. I wanted to make sure that the snowflakes stay on the inside where they belong, because I do not want them on the front of my pillow. That's gonna ruin the whole vibe. And yes, I am sewing on my bed, so it works just fine. The tricky part is using your knee to hit the pedal. And with our sewing machine, we're simply just gonna go along those seams, removing the pins as we go. Supposedly you're able to actually sew over pins, but I never do. It makes me too nervous. So I just take them out as I go, and we have a very nice seam holding our whole entire structure together. From a different day, we are going to keep working on this pillow case. So as I said before, I didn't iron out any of this fabric, and you probably should, but now that everything is all connected, I actually went through and ironed all of our pieces, and I also made the back pieces. I ended up making it out of this snowflake pattern, and I just did the same thing, put this sort of silvery side on the inside so that you can't see it. And basically those pieces are just as long as this one, and then for the length of them, you're supposed to take your total length of your pillow at 6 inches and then divide by 2. For me, I think it was like 12 inches or something like that. My pillows are 16 inches, but this piece is 18. So all of those are ready. I got those back pieces cut out, and then I just folded over about 1/2 inch or so for like a nice seam, and then I ironed over that. And then later we'll sew that, and that way there's just like a nice clean edge. And I did end up having to get some things at Hobby Lobby because there's so much texture on this pillow, which is honestly what I love about it. It takes this like such basic pattern to a very elevated, very kind of classy boho look. So basically I brought this picture into the store with me, and for the ends that are kind of like tassel-y, I decided to go with these little tassels from Hobby Lobby. These are only a few bucks, $3.99 for 1 yard. So these are the little tassels. I have worked with these before and I love them. And then as for, there's like little details that are kind of like bows, and then there's like a little like ribbon, a strip of ribbon behind it. I got this thin little ribbon. It's really lacy and just really pretty, and I think this one is 3 yards for $3.99. So those are gonna go there. As for like the little frills that are in the middle and also the actual bow things, I got a couple different strings. It's essentially this natural cord. I knew I didn't want any sort of thread or anything because that's too thin and we'd be here forever and it would break super easily. If we did something like this, it's more prominent, easier to work with for sure. And I just got one of these and also one of the bigger ones. For some reason, this one that is like less string is more expensive than this one. Another important thing to mention is that I wanted to make sure that these colors, like the ribbon and the little bow thing, went together pretty well. So I'm gonna start placing the ribbon and the tassels, and then I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna do those little bows and everything. Now what you see me doing here, I probably didn't need to do in the first place, but I did use some masking tape to sort of map out the size of my pillow and sort of give myself some margins so that I had an idea of where everything was going to go. And this part is super easy. You just look at your picture and you replicate it as best you can. So I just laid out those 3 ribbons on the beige side, and then there's one down the pink side, and I just laid everything out. With the tassels, you actually do want to cut the one on the end off. I just do it just to make sure that it's not going to get caught in our sewing or anything like that. And the tassel is going to be like tucked underneath the pillow anyways, so you might as well. Next, we're going to make a bunch of those little bows that you see all over the pillow, and it's actually very easy to make them. So you're going to start with your string, and you're going to start at the top of 4 of your fingers. It's very similar to making tassels, and we're going to wrap it around our fingers 10 times and cut off the end. Now I want to make sure everything sort of stays together. Later on, I actually did pre-cut a bunch of those strings so that they're ready to go. That way I could wrap them around my finger and just easily lay it on the string. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to lay it in the middle, and then we're just going to tie the string around it in a knot. So I double knotted it just to make sure everything is going to stay in place. And then for this particular one, I had a little string sticking out, so I just trimmed that, and that's it. You just sort of fluff it out a little bit. And of course, like I said, I had to make 20 of these, and honestly, I found that I could make one in like a minute, so it takes really no time at all. Alright, so quick update. I made all of our little bows and everything. I was trying to figure out, first of all, how to make fringe, and I'm not figuring out a solution that's like not gonna take 5 hours. And also, I feel like if we do fringe, like there's so much going on this already. I think I'm just gonna do a ribbon down here and leave this by itself, because I think there's gonna be so much more going on, and this also has a slight texture to it. So I think that's what I'm going to do, but it honestly looks like very, very, very similar to the Etsy one. So far it's going good. I'm going to do that really quick. I'm going to attach all of our ribbons, and then I'm going to have to apply each. I think there's 20 of these by hand. And then I'll show you guys how I put the front and the back 2 pieces together. And for this is basically the same as the pinning that we did earlier. I'm gonna remove my tape just because it's a lot easier to get to like the tassels and get underneath the fabric and everything, but I put about 5 pins or so on each strip, and it worked really, really well. It keeps everything in place, and then we're going to go into the actual sewing. So the tassels are a little bit more difficult just because the band of it is a bit thicker, but just take your time and go through on the ribbons and also the tassels. I went through twice. I tried to go more towards the right side and then more towards the left side just to make sure that it was really well adhered to the pillowcase. And we're just going to take our time and go through and do this. Make sure that your fabric is nice and taut and flat. It just makes things so much easier. And then, like I said, we're going to do those back pieces and just sew along the seam. Now we're going to be attaching our bows. This part was a little bit difficult. The first one I did, it looks like I struggled, and I did, but as I went through, I found a better way to do it. So essentially, you see me wrapping that piece of tape around one of our ends, and those are the ends that we use to sort of tie around the middle of that bow, and we're going to place it where we want it. And I didn't really measure, I just went in the middle, top, bottom, and then went in the middle of those 2, if that makes sense. And we're basically going to take our needle and put both ends through the back of the pillow, double knot it, and then cut off the excess. And the trick that I learned that just makes this so much easier is to sort of pull apart the ends so that it's kind of frayed. It really makes it a lot easier to make the end flat so that it fits through your needle a lot easier. And then you can just do the same sort of method. And this took me a few minutes every bow. It was definitely something I put on like a YouTube video for, just to make it go by a little bit faster. But honestly, it was the best way I could think of to make sure that these bows were not going to move. And now we're going to be prepping for putting our pillow together. I'm going to be taping the tassels to the inside of that pillow because we do need to sew along that seam, and if the tassels get caught, it's going to be a big mess. So I'm just using some Scotch tape, but you could really use like painter's tape or anything like that to keep it there. And now for putting the actual pillow together, we are going to take one of our top or bottom pieces and we're going to put that on the top and then put it on the bottom, having the inside of the pillowcase facing upwards. So as you can see, I have my shiny silvery snowflakes facing upwards. And now we're just gonna go around the whole entire pillow, make sure we get all those layers. Another thing is our face of the pillow is gonna be on the inside. So basically everything that's going to be showing, everything that you want to be showing, is all going to be facing on the inside, so that way when we pull it inside out, what you want to see is showing. Hopefully that makes sense, but if not, these visuals I think really help that. And now we're basically just gonna stitch all around the pillow. If you haven't worked with a sewing machine very much, it's actually very nice around the corners because you can sort of lift up the foot of the sewing machine and keep your needle down and just sort of pivot 90 degrees. So that works really nicely. And now I'm just touching up all the threads. I did have to go back through and make a little patch because I missed a spot when I pulled it inside out, but I think this turned out so pretty. I can't believe we made this. Like, this is the most textured pillow that I've ever made, the most effort that I've ever put into a pillow, and I love it. It's so pretty, and we made it ourselves for a fraction of the price. And then the second thing that we're going to be DIYing is this vase that I found on Pottery Barn. And I had a couple different options. I had like a wood grain or this stone one. So it was either going to be a faux wood vase or stone. And I posted a poll on Instagram. If you don't follow me there, you can follow me. It's Brooke__Ava. I do polls like this all the time. And you guys decided to go with the faux stone. So I got a little vase that we are going to be DIYing and turning into this vase. Okay, the next project we're going to be working on in this video is that stone vase that I showed you guys. So essentially, this is the vase that I have. I went garage sailing and I got this for like $2, I think. But this is like a really heavy duty vase already. I think it's already like ceramic. We're gonna make this look like a stone, and I think it's gonna be really cool. I have a few different ideas. I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna execute it just yet. We're kind of just gonna play around, but I have a joint compound to put all over it, and then I also have dirt, for lack of better words. I don't know if I want to mix some of it into the joint compound or if I should just put some of it on the surface, but I think I'm doing a little bit of both. I don't think I'm going to go crazy because I don't want to mess with the consistency, and then we'll add a little bit of texture to the outside. That part is going to be really fun. I think what I'm going to do is get some sandpaper, go over the whole thing so that the joint compound sort of has something to grip to, and then we'll go on with our joint compound. We'll let that dry, and then we'll paint it and make it look super aged and cool. So now that our base is roughened up a little bit, we need to start the joint compound process. And in order for that, we need to make a couple different tools, and we're doing everything budget friendly. So I have some pieces of cardboard. I'm essentially gonna cut out a couple strips of just like little rectangles that we can use to like apply to the vase. And then I'm also going to make one that has like a pointed edge so that we can make our lines down it. I'm trying to figure out which vase I want to recreate because there's technically two different ones in this Pottery Barn one. I might just play around with it and see. One of them has more like vertical lines and the other one has more like a slight grid to it. And I think I'm just gonna take a little bowl and mix a tiny bit of dirt into it just to give it a little bit of a texture, you know? After making our little DIY cardboard tools, we're gonna start laying on our joint compound. So I'm basically gonna put a little bit in a little paper bowl here, and I'm gonna mix in a little bit of the dirt just to give it a little bit of a grit. And later I kind of realized that this didn't really make much of a difference, and that's kind of the reason why I only did a little bit, because I just didn't want to mess with the consistency. And I found that propping up my vase on this little jar made it super easy to get the joint compound on the bottom of the vase and just make sure that I can see everything that I'm doing. So this part is actually super easy, and it doesn't need to be pretty. You just kind of lay it on thick, knowing that you're going to take some off, sand some off later, and just make sure you get every single little space on that vase covered. Now we're going to take our little pointy tool that we made, and I decided to do the design of the vase that's towards the front of that picture on Pottery Barn. So I basically made some vertical lines up our vase, and then I roughly smoothed out the top of the vase. And I did this again pretty roughly, knowing that I'm going to go in with sandpaper later, and then we're going to let that sit overnight until it is completely dry. Alright, we are now on the final day of making over this vase. I'm not gonna lie, this took a very long time to dry out the joint compound. I have used this exact tub of joint compound before and it has dried so much faster, like in 12 hours. This took a full 24. We are going to start by roughly sanding it down. We want it to look very stone, very rough, just like the Pottery Barn one, but I do want to get some of those sharp edges down and make it look more rock-like. And then we're going to go in with our paint and our dirt and everything and give it some really nice texture. We're going to do like dry brushing and use like different sponges and stuff like that to really get some good texture on there. Maybe do some speckles with like a paintbrush or something like that. So we're going to start that process. Hopefully I can get it done pretty quickly, and then once it's completely dry, I'll do this off camera. I'm going to go over it with like a clear coat, just this like acrylic clear coat that's going to keep our paints on there. But I'm going to go ahead and get out all my colors and start mixing things, sand it down, and we're going to wrap up this project, and I think it's going to be really fun. The sanding of this is actually like the most fun, satisfying part because you get so much of that dust all over and it just makes everything so smooth and nice. And I also roughly wiped it with a towel. I wasn't too worried about all the little granules of joint compound that may get into my paint because we're going to be adding texture anyway. And based off the pictures, these are some of the colors that I use, lots of beiges and stuff. And I decided to do the base in off-white, so I just did a little bit of white with the tiniest bit of beige. And at this stage, I didn't think of it at the time, and I honestly don't know how I didn't, but you could also add a little bit of baking soda to it to give it that really nice stone texture. But later on, we're going to be adding lots of texture with other different paint brushes and other different techniques. So as you can see, I let my first coat dry just a little bit, and then I went in with more of that off-white, and I just added a bunch of different colors. I literally threw the dirt on there, and it was honestly so fun. And I had a little sponge brush that I used, and I was just, you know, doing what makes sense, mixing colors, and I just kind of roughly made it look like stone, and it was just really fun. Get really creative with it. Of course, you could make it as many different colors as you'd like, but I really tried to stay true to the Pottery Barn one. And next, to give it even more of that stone look, I'm going to mix together all of those colors essentially, use my fluffy little brush and sort of whack it against my finger, and it splatters on there super nicely to make it look like a stone vase. And another thing that I forgot to mention earlier is I used a bunch of old paintbrushes, that way if anything happened to them, it wouldn't be a big deal. And I also went in with my Cricut weeding tool, and I just literally whacked at it and got some little holes in it, which turned out really cute. And overall, I love how this DIY turned out. As I said, I did spray it with that clear coat just to make sure everything was adhered to the base, but I just love all the texture. It looks so antique, but it's just like this pretty off-white, but it's got so much texture and it just adds the perfect accent to any room. Alright guys, that's going to be the end of today's video. Make sure you let me know in the comments what you thought of these, and like I said, any other ideas that you have for DIY dupes that you'd like to tackle in the future with me, and we can figure them out. But I just thought this was really fun. Of course, you guys know that I am very cheap by nature, so I love doing these. Make sure that you subscribe down below for new videos on home, lifestyle, and DIY every single week, and give this video a thumbs up if you like the concept of this video and all the different DIYs that we did together. So anyway, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, whatever you're doing, and I cannot wait to see you super soon. Bye!